Jordan's job is to keep an eye on the numbers for the quorum. However, before I go any further, I'd like us all to stand for a moment's silence, please, in terms of Kingi Tuheitia. I just would like to acknowledge, obviously, the passing of Kingi Tuheitia. In 2009, along with Right Honourable John Key, Kingi Tuheitia launched the first future-proof strategy. So that's 15 odd years ago. And in his mihi at that time, he quoted his tupuna, Tawhio, who had said, and I quote, "Without a vision, the people will perish." He further noted that Future Proof has a strong vision for its communities, and in particular a key recognition of Te Turu Whaimana. He concluded his 2024 mihi to the reviewed strategy, I quote, "All must take up a paddle to advance our collective waka into a future that is secure." So I'd just like to acknowledge on behalf of the Future Proof Partnership, the input and the very clear direction and messaging received from him. At this point, I'd also like to acknowledge the new Maori Queen, Nā Waihono I Te Pou, and extend the Future Proof Partnership's best wishes for a long and enduring time in the role that she has been recently anointed. And Lyndall, can you please take the opening karakia? Thank you.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai, e he aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, te hei Māori ora.
Thank you. We'll take the health and safety report as read. Apologies.
Just health and safety warning, that stuff does my head in. I had to sneak out at too. Just checking.
There are not. Now we'll move to the confirmation of minutes and item 6.1, which is on page 9, And this is not so much confirmation, but it's receipt of the Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee meeting on the 2nd of August. Can I have Mayor Susan, you moving receipt of that? Seconded by Mayor Adrian. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against, carried. And we'll move to the next item, is the Future Proof Implementation Committee minutes on page 18. I'm happy to move receipt of those. Is there a second for those? Is it okay. Who was the seconder? Okay, Mayor Adrian. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against, carried. So now we'll move on to business. On the 7 June minutes. You are noted. Yes. Thank you. So we'll now move to item 7.2, and that's the South Auckland Economic Masterplan presentation. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Bill Cashmore. Great to see you again, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And great to have you around the table. So I had been invited to a presentation on the master plan a few weeks ago in South Auckland, and also Vishal was at that same presentation. And then a subsequent conversation with Bill, and we thought it would be worthwhile in terms of him presenting to the implementation committee. Hence, we are here today. And I'll hand over to you, Bill, to take us through the presentation. Once you've gone through that, there may be some questions from members around the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ine mana ine reo, ine rangatirima, ine wha tēnei koutou, tēnei koutou, tēnei koutou katoa. And to Akwe for the invitation. It's a privilege to be here. I don't feel like a newbie because I sat around this table on this committee for a few years and around a table like this a little bit further north for 12 years. I'll rattle through these fairly quickly because some of you will be quite familiar with it. The Franklin ward is the one that borders the North Waikato. We are your closest neighbours. However, this strategy we're looking at encompasses more than the Franklin ward. It's really a South Auckland strategy, but the biggest growth areas are in this ward, especially as far as job creation are concerned. And as we go through, you'll see the numbers, which are quite outstanding. The journey started about 18 months ago when I got asked by Auckland Unlimited to head up a large group of people who were involved in helping the South grow. Council agencies, but also the Crown. There was about 70 or 80 people around a table, all online because we were enjoying COVID in those days. And I quickly looked at it and thought, this is probably meaning really well, but it's lacking focus and it's not charging ahead as much as is needed and as much as the investors were requiring. So I formed a subgroup, created the subgroup, was called FEDA, Franklin Economic Development Areas. And to belong to that group, you had to be investing or have invested over $500 million in development. We started off with 10, we're now at 12 and growing, I would say, one member every 3 months. The list you see on the wall up there is pretty hard to see in this sort of writing, but if you want to download it, it is available, I'm sure, from the website of Council here.
And we've got the presentation
We've
on
got the presentation, right. So it's a heck of a lot more than those. But those are some of the big and medium ones. Some of them on there aren't belonging to our group or have just joined, just got enough scale. But that gives an indication of the amount of development that's already starting. Next, please. And it's been 15 years going. This is not new. This is not greenfields. It's been going since I was elected member in 2010, basically. And if you look, starting from the top left, what drove it all off is quarries. Quarries are a precious resource. A lot of people who live near them don't like them, but aggregate is critical to build this country, our cities, our roadways, our rail, everything. And 50% of Auckland's aggregate comes out of the Franklin region. And that is actually 80% of the aggregate supplied. And of course, then we have sites that are already under development, like Drury West, Pairata Rise. There's been over 2,000 houses delivered to date. Top right is Blue Float, the wind farm. And you would all have had the, I presume, Mr. Chair, the presentation on that, where it's going to be the size of the power Simon Huntley. The bottom right is the steel mill at Glenbrook. I think big project back in the days. It's one of the few that has actually survived. And it's growing and changing from coal-based to electricity and eventually to hydrogen. Partnering up with international companies to use the latest work around hydrogen and energy creation to create completely 100% recyclable steel. It's a never-ending lifespan. And then there's the housing developments in the centre bottom. And on the left bottom, that's sort of central Drury itself. That is actually called Drury South Crossing. It's the old Stevenson development. It fronts onto the quarry. Mark Franklin, the late Mark Franklin, built up the strategy to protect the quarries from urban sensitivity. That area has now had over $1 billion invested into it by the developer and by private agencies. Stevenson was buying that land at around $10 a square metre. It now sells for $1,000. And then you put a building on top of it, such as that Cardinal one you see there. If you drive up the motorway coming from Hamilton up north and look across to your right, you'll see it. It's one of the biggest buildings that's gone up in this country. And that area of commercial industrialisation doubles every year. They're on stage 4 and 5 now, 3/4 complete and no debt. And it's all funded by cash flow. The other big thing about the Drury South Crossing development is they funded all the infrastructure, internal and external. Major roads coming in, out, water, wastewater, and reticulated water. Funded by the company at 1/3 of the price that council said it could supply it at, 1/3. And this has been the big learning and education we've had from these developments, and we'll talk about that a little bit more going on. Next, please. So this is the investment we've seen to date. There's some very, very big numbers there. The key one, of course, is the electrification of the rail from Papakura down to Puki, plus 3 new rail stations. State Highway 1 widening, and there's more of that to go. And there's going to have to be some interchanges with State Highway 1 and 22 as the developments go on in the very near future. Connection up Drury East, Drury West to the big commercial employment areas. And you would have all read late last year, early this year, of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare buying the land. There's 70 hectares of land just about 4 kilometres south of Drury that is going to employ, by over the next 20 years, 18,000 people. Ardmore Airport. There was a plane on the picture just before. Ardmore Airport is the forgotten little gemstone in this area of growth. They are creating 6,000 jobs as we speak now. The land has mostly been sold to commercial developers. The roading works and infrastructure works are in. But surrounding them again is another bunch of property owners who want to do further commercial and industrial. So that number of employment will probably treble over the next 10 years or so. It is growing at a phenomenally fast rate. And then there, of course, is the Glenbrook Steel Mill. And we'll talk more about that in a tick. Thank you. So they're the key players. Each one of these companies has invested a substantial amount in the area. It's like I say, in excess of $500 million each and growing. The great thing about those companies is they've got long teeth, long memories and resilience. They've been around a while and they will stay around a while. They will build through this current recession. Thank you. When I put all these numbers together, I visited each of those developers and spoke to them about, okay, where are you at in your development? Where are you wanting to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time? How many square metres will you utilise and what sort of employment will you create and what are the numbers? The headline numbers were quite staggering. You see it there, 50,000 Tier 1 jobs. And Tier 1 jobs get serviced by Tier 2 and 3. Take the steel mill as it stands now. It has 1,000 employees, but it has 3,000 contractors. So if the steel mill ends up with 10,000 employees, there could be a further 30,000 associated with that growth. We are already seeing it with Drury's South Crossing, where there is 6,000 people going to be employed there over the next couple of years, and the ancillary servicing tier 2 and 3 businesses are already starting up. And every evidence is going to be another 10,000 or more there. Thank you. Housing, of course, the whole idea of this development, which will be probably the biggest economic development program New Zealand's ever seen, is that people will live, work, play and thrive in their environment. When I was a councillor up in Auckland, I would travel 2.5 to 3 hours every day commuting. Getting up at 4:15, if I got home by 7:30, it was a really good night. Sometimes it was midnight. There's too many people in this city of ours and up in Auckland who suffer similar sort of pain and commute. This South Auckland area will be a place where you can live, work and play with a 15-minute commute or bike ride or walk. The Drury East and Drury West urban developments will be in close proximity to Fisher and Paykel Healthcare. Will be a 15-minute bus ride to Glenbrook Steel Mill and will be a walk to the retail areas of Kiwi Property in Drury Central. It is going to be a good outcome. Thank you. There's been considerable investment to date. I've already talked about the private investment, but also the Crown has put a lot of money in. We talked about the electrification. Water care is well over $1 billion and growing. And they're future-proofing it. Pukekohe used to have the most undrinkable water, the most unsanitary water in this country when I was first elected. I didn't know that at that stage, but it was. You didn't own a white shirt if you lived in Pukekohe because it would turn grey pretty quick. $1 billion later, Pukekohe's got a water system and a wastewater system that is future-proof for the next 2 generations. The investment will continue as it will have to. And what we're trying to do is make it unique in that we're not going to run to the council or the government with our hand out all the time. We're going to find ways using user pays to generate as much of it, of the income and capex that is required to deliver the assets internally ourselves as a wider capacity of a group. Thank you. And of course, we don't want to affect the great stuff that comes out of Franklin and the North Waikato and lots of other rural places in the country. 88% of this country's tradable exports come from rural sectors. And we've got to protect that. So we're not going to plant houses or factories on elite growing lands. And we're going to protect them from reverse sensitivity. However, on my office wall at home, I've got a photo of the main street of Pukekohe taken in 1902. One street, gravel, full of horse poo, 2 greengrocers type stores, a haberdashery, a blacksmith and a carpenter. Pukekohe has grown to the town that it is now by growing onto good growing lands. And yet there is more value commodities come out of that Franklin, central Franklin and West Franklin area than ever has before. Science, technology, management and environmental stewardship have ensured that the growers will continue to be able to grow and grow well and grow better. Gone are the days where the soil around Franklin is just a holder for the nitrogen fertiliser to pump the onions out of the ground. It's been rebuilt by good stewardship by the growers, and it's great to see. The journey's not over, but it will continue, and we as a community want to protect that. At the same time, we respect the need for economic growth, employment, and exports for the country. Thanks. Quality of lifestyle. COVID did a couple of crazy things. People discovered the Awhitu Peninsula. Now, the first time I drove up there, a decade or more ago, actually 2 decades ago, I don't know how many of you have been up there, but it's such a unique place. It's windswept, sand dunes, but it's incredibly beautiful. And when you get to the top, to that lighthouse, the views are outstanding out to the Waitakere Ranges and back in over all of Auckland. The number of B&Bs up that peninsula, I would have doubled, quadrupled, I don't know, quintupled over COVID, because people discovered that as a place to go and enjoy a break for a long weekend rather than Fiji or Sydney or Melbourne. And it's continued. And on the east coast where I live, You know, you've got Beachlands, Maraito, the beautiful white sandy beaches, and of course the Hunua Ranges in between, which is the lungs for Auckland. It is quite an outstanding place, as well as the second fastest growing region in Auckland and the country. As I said before, this is potentially the largest economic development in New Zealand's history. In fact, that's been confirmed by MB a couple of weeks ago. What we are doing now is working to produce a seamless development. And that sounds a little bit passé. What we've done is we've gone to the ministers, Bishop, Simeon Brown, and our local MPs, Bailey and Judith Collins, and shown them a presentation very, very similar to this. I said, this is what's happening in this patch. There is an opportunity to make the most of this. We went to Auckland Council, to the Mayor, and Wayne Brown came down to Drury South Crossing headquarters, right in front of the Cardinal building, looked back at that and said, why didn't I know about this? I said, well, you did, Mr. Mayor, because we told you before the election. But you went on the radio 3 months ago and said, why would you invest in Drury? We want you to show you why. He left an hour and a half later saying, I am your go-to person. I am your biggest fanboy. Let's make this happen. Phil Wilson, the chief executive, has got on board. We have council's number 3 person is our go-to person to get things done, with a high-level group of appointees with an open book scenario, an alliance delivery model where everyone is frank and honest about what is needed, when and how. Let's take the social infrastructure for Drury Central for a start. It's going to need a heated indoor swimming pool. It's going to need a community centre. It's going to be 30,000 people live there. It's going to need tennis courts. It's already got rugby fields and soccer pitches, but there might need to be more. Kiwi Property says, we will build those for you, Auckland Council. We will build a $20 million heated indoor swimming pool, a $15 million community centre, when we build our retail outlets. So it all arrives at the same time. And the council can either take the cost of those buildings off the development contributions that Q would otherwise would have paid, or it can pay a return on capital of around 4% on a lease type arrangement. We're not going to suggest there's going to be one simple solution for every development. There are numerous developments and consenting processes, RMA procedures, through these numerous large-scale developments. Each one will have its own contract back to government and council, stipulating the how, what, when and why, and it will be a legal binding contract. But it won't be so legal and binding that we end up in the courts making lawyers rich. It will be legal and binding the fact that this is the intention, this is what we want to happen. We understand that there are changes and differences as we go through. This hasn't been tried before, but what has amazed me is when we finished this presentation, when you were there, Mr. Chairman, Chris Bishop pulled me outside and said, I'll have someone before you who will be very high in MHUD within a week. He did. NZTA have done the same thing. Kiwi Rail has yet to come to the party, but there's someone speaking to their board chair and CE today. We want to make this happen. The community's behind it. They weren't for a start. They saw a areas where there was a whole bunch of lifestyle blocks. There wasn't really any real agriculture per se. It was catteries and dog kennels and things like that, goat and the donkey. But they're now seeing the opportunities for their children and their grandchildren. Always sell up and move out. And that's what's happened. Some have stayed, some have gone. Things are changing. The big developers have actually put their hand in their pocket and say, we will provide subsidised rentals or pop-ups for the areas that have been going to be pulled down and rebuilt or changed or relocated. They are continually speaking to community every quarter of the year to say, this is the progress. This is where we're at. This is where we want to be. You're not going to make everybody happy. Sometimes the property owner and the business developer or the business who's running a butchery shop or a bakery there won't agree. You can't make that happen. All you can do is offer the opportunities. What's impressed me is that no one's now fighting. 18 months into this job, the fighting stopped and we are focusing on delivering together. And that's been the challenge. The next part is, okay, the meeting in 2 weeks' time is what are the roading requirements? We want to fund the whole of Mill Road from A to Z. We want to get the designation of the route done. We want to get the land purchase done and build 2 lanes first, then 4. And we'll want to fund it. You would have heard the Minister speak about this, by a smart road pricing system for trucks. There's 8,000 truck movements a day in that area, quarry trucks, landfill trucks, and freight trucks. The trucking companies, of course, will go crazy, but I've had a closed-door meeting with them, and they say, listen, we get it. It has to be happening. Because the alternative is never-ending black lines on State Highway 1 outside Drury, Raumarama, Takanini, and Papakura. So there are some things that should have been delivered 40 years ago, or certainly 20. We want to try and make it happen now. And is that our last one? I think it is, Lyndall. There's the opportunity, what we're just talking about. And what is required? So that 30-year plan, the first focus will be on the 5 years. We're drawing up a list right now of what is required in the first 5 years and who's going to be responsible for it. We'll get agreement for that. Then we'll use CIP or funding and financing measures to deliver them. We will keep measuring progress and reporting back to the Mayor and to the Ministers about how we are going. This sort of development will be good for employment, good for quality of life, and good for Auckland, but it's also going to be mighty good for the Waikato because it can be replicated. Because this golden triangle is where 80% of the employment growth and population growth is going to be. Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga. 80% is projected of New Zealand's growth financially and population-wise to be in this area. And one thing we have learned is you can't stop that growth. It's inevitable. It's a steamroller that is not stoppable. All you can do is make it work as possibly as best as you can for the individuals, for the communities, for the economy. And one good case in point there, that last line there, hospitals and schooling. 10 years ago, the Ministry of Education said, we don't land bank. So I gave them a mathematical financial analysis. Says, by not land banking, you are paying more for a square metre of land than what you would have paid for a hectare. 10, 15 years later. They have bought land in every one of those urban developments in Franklin to date to protect it for schools, both primary and secondary. And in credit to a couple of developers, they're putting stuff aside for tertiary. Hospitals, everyone knows that North Waikato, Coromandel and South Auckland desperately need a new hospital of scale and scope. Fisher & Paykel Healthcare says it will help the Ministry of Health deliver a new hospital in the area. And we've got private finances in Australia and New Zealand who will fund the capital build. The government would just have to lease half the building as a public hospital facility. The other half be run by private. I imagine the efficiencies of having the two side by side would work quite nicely. Again, trying things that are new that haven't been done in this country before. And some of the bureaucrats in Wellington are going to have to think a little bit differently. And that's where it's good, where you've got ministers, and I'll give credit to the last government as well. They had ministers there who were brave and had the foresight to see, let's push this ahead. And I thank them for that, as I'm thanking this government as well for today and what is happening. The partnerships are there. We've spoken about them. Each developer has an iwi partnership with 1, 2 or 3 iwi. Those are solid. They don't need to be replicated. They don't need to be repeated by the FEDA group, but they need to be respected, and we do that. We have a meeting next Monday or Tuesday with all the iwi leaders, and that will be happening every quarter. But it's led by iwi and Hapu in the area, not by council, not by me. It's led by them, which is a great way to go forward, I think. I'm looking forward to it. We done, Lyndall? Final one. Oh, there. I think I've spoken about what's next. The investment is critical. The timing is critical. Auckland Council had a reputation, and it's true, that they would take development contributions, they would hold them in the bank account or spend them elsewhere and then fund something, your pool or community centre or your sports field 10 or 15 or 20 years later when it was too late. Ormiston had nothing, no town centre, no sports, no recreation things for 15 years. And those of you who've been to would have seen the 20, 30,000 people that have moved into that area. We want not to replicate that or repeat it. We want to have the community facilities arriving, if not before, alongside the population in the houses. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Happy to take very easy questions. Don't want any hard ones.
Thanks, Bill. Mayor Adrian.
I'll jump straight in. Coming from an area that has a lot of high productive soils, what's your zoning? Where's everything at with your zoning up there, and what is your, are you caught in that at all?
So the quality growing soils have been identified. The biggest hindrance for quality horticultural growth is reverse sensitivity.
Mm.
So
They came our way. In Maramarapia.
a lot of it, they spread, yeah, and also because of other things other than just reverse sensitivity. But the Auckland Unitary Plan changed the rules.
Mm.
12 years as a councillor, I could give you chapter and verse on people ringing up very angry about fertiliser spreadings, planes flying around, helicopters. My neighbour moved from her area in town, Marnell, out to rural Oriri with her 5 children, and a husband who had a chemist operation in Onehunga, I think it was. The first thing she said to me is, I don't want to see any planes or helicopters. I don't want no fertilisers, no chemicals. We own the biggest farm in Auckland.
Mm.
And my response was, that's fine, we'll talk it through. And we did. We were training helicopter pilots in, we still do. We had our airstrip flying on fertilisers and weed sprays, and we still do. We're using more drones now. If you work with people, you can sound out and sound pathways forward to work together cooperatively. We've had to do that all our life. We're doing it again now with this development. So yeah, I get what you're saying, but also remember, you look at the hothouse area, so that is more productive than any soil grow medium, and science is going to change a lot of what we're going to do, especially with the GE potential that's going to be arriving.
So was the land already zoned? That wasn't rural. Yeah, that's the key.
So it was
2022 was when the game changed.
Yeah, so it was, the quality soils were recognised. The Act passed, pushed forward by David Parker, formalised it. Well, we already had something very similar to that.
Yeah.
The trouble is, some stages the mapping is not always perfectly accurate, but that's just a matter of common sense through the planning process.
Nanaia, online.
Yeah, kia ora. Can you hear me through the chair?
Yes, we can.
Yes, look, I'm just interested in, you mentioned about 30,000 people living there. So what project or infrastructure have you got in place to enhance the Waikato River in terms of the amount of water that you're going to require? At the moment, Auckland's taking 90% of it. And we're also talking about the minerals. I don't see Winston Aggregates as part of that process, who has a partnership within the lower Waikato, which is alongside Te Taniwhao Waikato, and within Te Puaha Waikato, given that the two main infrastructure that's built in that area where I'm from, and that's the water take and also the wastewater treatment plant. When you speak about iwi, who are the iwi are you actually talking to? Because I don't think I've met you, and I've been to most of those meetings that we had to go to in terms of partnership and relationship. And especially we have a sign-off agreement with Waikato Tainui and Watercare. So I'm interested to hear a bit more about what you want to do. And I'll just give you a bit more history in regards to where you think most of the minerals come from. 80% of the minerals came from Te Puaha Waikato to build Auckland. And that was most of the sands that was taken there. At that time, right back to the 40s, 50s, and 60s, Pukikoe and Tōko was a apartheid town. They were the only apartheid town in New Zealand. And Māoris had to work on one side of the line that was given to them to stay on one side of the footpath and one side of the road. So, you know, the history that you present may be kosher to you, but it's certainly not kosher to the people who have been living there for many years. So I'd like to follow that up. My name is Nanaia Rawiri. Be more than happy to meet with you. And I represent ngā kauatua o te waka. Kia ora, through the chair.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you for your words. I respect what you're saying, and I particularly respect what you said about Pukikoe and, do we put it blunt, the racism that existed there. My last public meeting was with a group of people who weren't from Puki, Maori people who came up from the Taranaki. Their families helped harvest the market garden crops in the 50s and 60s. They were treated abysmally. And there's a book written by an American about that. Those issues need to be resolved. But Pukekohe is a very different place now to what it was then, both in a cultural sense, but also in an environmental and productivity sense. And that needs to continue to grow and improve in all facets. The developers all have meaningful relationships with their local iwi or iwis. And usually there's 2 or 3 iwi in the area that they're dealing with, because these are such large developers. However, the relationships must remain strong and must continue to grow and evolve so that the partnerships, the participations, and the protections are in life hand in hand with ongoing productivity gains that helps all the people in the area, especially the most who are disadvantaged.
Yeah, kia ora for that. I just want to put something else on the table because you probably won't know this. Within Waikato, there's 6,500 parcels of land that Waikato Tainui are entitled to. That's in Waikato only. Within Tāmaki Makaurau, and especially the South Auckland, 855 acres of parcels of land are also Waikato Tainui entitled to. So you may need to do a background on those lands because they will be aligned with what I've just said. Kia ora.
Thank you. Te Akoi.
Now I've got Carolyn, Chair Pamela, and Mayor Paula in that order.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Great presentation. I commend your team for the work done. Look, at Waikato District Council, we've to have a good relationship with your local Franklin board. Clearly, there have been your staff have been working in respect of that boundaryless approach with investment in transport. But what I can say is, we need to actually work together because we share a lot of our services, don't we? That old Franklin boundary is still in the north there with shared services in respect of Auckland City with emergency services and even as far as transport, the police, the pens, the schools, all of that social infrastructure too. We have that shared relationship. I would even go as far as saying probably land. A lot of your growers are probably using land for growing down in our tuakau as well. So all I can say, and it probably also goes to supporting Lanaya's comment about that importance of open communication between our council ourselves, and we can partner up together and make the voices stronger. So it's absolutely great piece of work.
Thanks for the opportunity. We're very keen on partnership, very keen on sharing growth and understanding to better enable these developments, no matter what they are, to proceed with a degree of pace to maximise the potential they have for environmental, social and cultural improvements.
Yeah, Pamela.
Kia ora. Hey, thank you, Bill. And really, just to reiterate what Carolyn from Waikato District Council has said, I suppose listening to your presentation, extremely exciting in terms of what it brings to the connected regions together. But just to further endorse the need to have joined up conversations around the planning around transport, in particular public transport. There are a number of our ratepayers in the northern part of this region who really give no daily mind to where the boundary is between, and at times feel torn between a health region that is north and transport region that might be south, right? So I just want to stress the need to have joined up conversations, particularly if we're going to look around the future of not only our bus routes, but also Te Huia, and how a joined up approach between Waikato Region and Auckland Council will help ensure that that facility continues to support our communities, both in Auckland and in the Waikato going forward. But kia ora for your presentation.
Thanks for your comments, and your what are all about boundaries is so relevant, isn't it? Because the only people who really find these boundaries important awards are us. Mr. and Mrs. Smith out there, they don't give a toss. With the Pukekohe Library or the Tuakau sports fields, does the gravel come out of Stevie's quarry or Fulton Hogan's quarry now in Drury, or does it come from Angakino? You know, people don't care. And that's where the idea of funding local government via ratepayers and taxation, to me, seems an arrhythmia. We need to fund it by more user pays. Metering water, could you find where the leaks are for a start? And secondly, because it encourages people to conserve water. We metered water in Auckland over the whole region. We identified 80% of the leaks. We have fixed about 60% of those, but the water usage went down 23%. That's a success story there. And then the other one is, of course, this whole of pricing for roading. We have underinvested in this key infrastructure for 40 years in this country. And some of the people around here and some people sitting at the back know how passionate I am about that. And simply because the underinvestment has not led to good outcomes for anybody. We pick that mantle up and push it forward with long-term planning, that 30-year plans I spoke about before, 5-year increments. And you talk about doing 30-year contracts. I went to the farewell of Sean Sweeney, the chief executive of the Central Rail Link last Thursday. An internationally acclaimed big infrastructure engineer is leaving this country. He should be doing another Kaimai tunnel or Mount Victoria tunnel or whatever. Because the cost we have of start-go projects means what we do is twice the price of Australia per square linear metre, 3 times the price of America and Europe. We are biting our nose off to spite our face by not having a 30-year infrastructure delivery plan. We could do at least 2 or 1 and probably 3. Thanks.
Mayor Paula.
I'm interested.
Paula, could you just bring the mic closer, thanks?
Sorry. Very unlike me to be quiet, actually. So the things that I'm interested in are the external funding, because we also have alliances and private development developers, etc. But you made some comments about external partners, funding partners, including from Australia. Presumably those are capital investments that they're making, and you've got those secured, or?
No, because we have to get government approval. So we've got to present the business cases to the Crown yet. So we've got to nail down the methodology of how it's been done. It's been done in Australia. It's done in Europe and America all the time. There's ways through this, especially when you talk about very expensive items of infrastructure like hospitals.
As you go forward, because I've heard that rhetoric from central government also about, need to look offshore, whatever that means, wherever that means, money. And then you said about levies and tolls, so you've watered quite in Hamilton, although some parts of the future do. The other question was going to be around water. Because as of now, everyone's approaching the end of their first lot of, and we have helped Auckland out, let alone Franklin, but helped Auckland out with part of our supply of water. Obviously, we need some kind of sustainable arrangement. Hamilton Waipa will be asking for a share of that allocation, our growth. Got a comment on that? How are you going to in doing anything else other than river or
So the river can't be the long-term solution, I would think. And I'm not a politician anymore, and I'll probably get my wrist slapped for saying that, but I'm not afraid to say it because it's no one could predict the droughts that we had, those 4 years of devastating droughts. The city was running low. We needed to fix more of the leaks quicker. And at some point, Auckland's going to have to use desalination or some new technology to develop other methods. We don't have an ability to build more dams. That are cost effective. It would be horrendously expensive to do further dams. So desalination might be an option. And use new technology using electrolysis around that, but it might be a way out. Yet Watercare has got a team, or did have a team, until 2 years ago investigating that. So yeah, we have a 30-year strategy in the city, in Auckland, and it just needs to be carried through. I can't give you the direct answer. I'm sorry, Paula.
so I'm just wondering, is that part of your discussions with our external funders as to how they fund not just your hospital, but other core infrastructure?
So Watercare is tasked by legislation to fund the present and future needs for the city for the three waters. So that is really the area. She spoke to their chair again last Thursday night. You mentioned about the hospital. So there's a company in Australia that specialises in partnering up with public agencies to deliver hospitals. I had a brief discussion with Southern Cross about the same sort of thing. They are now in discussions with Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. But okay, how can we do this? It's a new venture for New Zealand to do it at this sort of scale, but it's common overseas and it's relatively common in Australia as well. So these companies do exist.
So you're looking like for venture capital.
Yep. Yeah. So you take the amount of money that's sitting in the pension fund or an ACC in this country, it's in the nearly $170 billion. It builds a fair bit of infrastructure. At the moment, we're investing in things in Australia and elsewhere. Maybe we could be investing in pathways in our own country. The challenge is the public have to accept that you have to fund the repayment of those debts over a 30, 40-year period.
Yeah. In terms of the scale, the impressive scale of what you see Franklin's future, how do you see that complementing or competing with proposition further down into the Waikato centres like Hamilton?
So when you think about it, I spoke about the tier 1, 2, and 3 employments. So the build employment areas in Franklin and in South Auckland, these are not shoveling coal. These are high value employment opportunities, engineering, AI.
Sounds like us, actually.
So we're all trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
However, when you've got an outfit like Fisher & Paykel, can be domicile in the centre of Franklin in South Auckland, and you've got 140 hectares of land being developed out by the airport, quite close to these employment contracts that are going on in Franklin. So there is opportunity there, and you get amalgamation, but there's always going to be spin-off effects for opportunity for growth for other people. We've seen that with the steel mill. We've seen with what Fisher & Paykel's been planned. We've seen it in all sorts of industries around the country. It's just a matter of scale.
I could say this with the staff won't see me, but spin-off effects of future growth economy. Just noting that the Waikato economy is outperforming at the moment. Still got opportunities, right?
Great news.
I know someone's got to do it right. You wouldn't expect me not to.
Hamilton's our friend, not our competitor. The Waikato, Bay of Plenty are our friends, not our competitors.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're right. It is about seeing that big picture where we sit in, because at the moment the government's going out with a festival, really, paying money before, and so I guess it's understanding how we of the upper central.
So my discussions with the ministers was what's happening in Franklin and South Auckland is probably not a regional deal because it's already underway. And we've actually done the deal part. We're in the build part, and it'll be probably the only area in the country that's got that in that position, especially at this scale.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got Nanaya, then Mayor Adrian, then Angela, and then I'll ask Robert to make some comments.
Thank you,
No.
Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Look, I just want to thank you for your presentation, but I just wanted to let you know that there are two projects that we are currently in process at the moment. One is the water storage to help enhance the Waikato River. That's where the water take is at the moment. And the other is desalination. That's also to enhance the river. And that desalination is a project designed for Auckland. So if you're keen to meet up and talk about that to help everyone else, we'd be more than happy to meet with you. Kia ora.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Angela.
I just want to say thank you very much to all of you, for mayors, councillors, for today, because and also to thank Bill too for presenting. I'm chair of the Franklin Local Board and working alongside with Bill's group, but just also to convey that the Franklin Local Board is sort of been aware of this big growth area that's happening, all the housing. We've been very conscious that we need the jobs to go with it as well. And just, hearing those comments about those borders, we know too well, COVID showed us that the borders don't mean anything, they're just lines. And we've got to sort of work towards how things are for the people that live nearby, so the tuakaus, poconos, etc. So we're trying to, any opportunity we've got, particularly if there's new policies or things that may affect those communities, we're always very conscious to point out, particularly to our Auckland staff colleagues, that they need to bear that in mind and consult with their peers in Waikato as well. We've been fortunate to have the support of MB in this, and we've got a dedicated person from MB for Franklin to help us work out the future of what job skills are going to be needed to meet the jobs that are coming down the pipeline. So that's another area that I think could benefit those northern Waikato areas as well, that there are opportunities for our younger people coming forward. But anyway, I won't say too much more because Bill's covered it off, and thank you, Bill, for taking the time to come down and present this.
Thank you, Angela. Robert.
Thanks, Bill. That was a brilliant presentation, and I think we've got a piece of work underway as Future Proof at the moment, looking at the public transport connections between North Waikato and South Auckland, which is really important to be informed by your study, thinking about what do we need over the next 30 years. So I'm hoping that the team are talking to your team as they do that work. And the intent is that'll inform both in the short term, the Waikato District and WRC long-term plans, annual plans, but also future work. As we look about that as an economic sub-region, the North Waikato, South Auckland in its own right. And for FPIC members, I've taken quite a lot of inspiration from the thinking that Tataki Unlimited and Bill and the team have done, and that's why we've got scoped up in our work program for next year 2 studies, one being North Waipa, South Hamilton, looking at the Southern Links and the consequences of Southern Links, but also the development aspiration around Hamilton Airport, what happens as the community in Peacocks grows, what do we need to do to optimize that area as a future-proof entity? So, because it spans Hamilton City, Waikato District a bit, and Waipa. We need to think collectively about what our response looks like, and the kind of facts and figures that Bill's citing for that area are smaller, because it's smaller scope than the whole of Franklin, but are still quite significant and something for us to really think about. And I've also got the same piece of work in mind for the Cambridge through to the Kaimais, Cambridge through to Tauranga, because I see the same kind of challenges arising as Cambridge to Pierere and Tauriko are finished as roading projects, and what kind of land use response does that drive in terms of economic aspirations for that part of the sub-region. So taking some real inspiration from the work that the team have done and how they can pull that together into a story that carries some weight for conversations with government.
Well, in a moment, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Bill, and agree with Angela's comments, and really appreciate the time, Bill, of coming down, presenting, and certainly attending the workshop. Certainly spiked my interest in terms of the approach and what you're endeavouring to do in South Auckland. There are there are a number of messages in what you presented, but two for me stand out in particular. And one was the messaging around the boundaryless approach. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. The only people, or the only organisations that tend to worry about boundaries are local government. So, you know, I think just re-emphasising that message of forgetting the boundaries, you know, what's best for whatever particular area. And the other message in terms of the need for that pipeline of work and delivery, and actually having that 30-year infrastructure and delivery plan. And you highlighted, Sean, in terms of leaving and things going to Ireland, in terms of but that's a symptom of what happens across a range of projects in this nation. So we've got to do better, but that requires a whole lot of joined up thinking, both at central and local government and the development community on that. But just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you for that, and certainly picking up Robert's points in terms of that ongoing connection between what we're doing here and what you're doing in South Auckland. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All the best to everybody for this term of local government, for this term of national government, that maybe get closer together, please, to make it all happen, because it's getting dire. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian, you were going to move. I can have a seconder. Okay, Chair Pamela, second it. Nothing further. I'll put that in terms of receipt of the presentation. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thanks very much. Safe journey, Bill. Okay, so we'll now move to item 7.3, the Implementation Advisors Report. I'm taking it as read. Robert, anything that you wish to comment on?
So I won't speak to any of the specific items on the report. The main thing is that the text that's in the report in that right-hand column about our achievements will flow through into the annual report that we're preparing at the moment, and that we'd expect to publish on the internet in the next month or so, which is one of our first big milestones in terms of starting to be more active with communications. And Natalie's on the phone just in case you guys have questions, because she'll amend the contents accordingly.
Any questions of Robert in terms of the advisors report? You question or you're moving, doing both?
No, but both. Just a couple of issues. Firstly, the low-hanging fruit in terms of the website refresh. I still note that we're actually running with the old photo with previous local government minister and previous. So it just occurs to me that probably should be ahead of the game. And also, just in respect of, I'm just referring to page 49 of the economic development, integrating it more fully. And I mean, I'm happy to actually have the discussion in the report to follow, but just maybe a bit more transparency around that piece of work, and as far as a working group or how that is going to.
So what we've got going at the moment is that the economic development managers for each of the partners are getting together. They've got together, I think, once or twice with me in the last 4 weeks. So we're still really early at determining what it is we need to do collectively. They're working really closely as a team, and they're looking for places where speaking as one voice as a sub-region would add to what they do. So they're trying not to duplicate what each other's doing, but what's the next thing that they can do collectively. I still haven't got a work program out of them to be able to tell you what they think that would be.
Okay. So in terms of that work program, I'm assuming that comes back to
Yes, it would.
FPIC, and
Yeah.
then we'll have some oversight over. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that'll be your next meeting.
Thank you.
And I'm taking you moving receipt of the, okay. No other questions? If I can go for who'd like to second that? Mayor Susan? Okay. Nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And we'll now move to item 7.4, the priority development areas update report. And we have Karen in person today. So welcome, Karen. I've seen you twice in 10 days.
Kia ora koutou everybody, ko Karen Saunders tōku ingoa. I'm here today to talk to you about our priority development areas and the refresh that the priority development areas working group has been working on. So we've been working on this for the last 3 or so months, and if you go to the next slide, Lyndall. Thanks. The purpose of today really is to seek endorsement from the committee on the refreshed set of PDAs. And noting as well that we also are discussing the northern Waikato areas and how they're grouped with Ngā Karuatua o Te Waka, and that meeting is happening on the 23rd this month. So I'll just very briefly take you through what we've done and then talk about the results, and then take some questions. So the purpose of the refresh really was to simplify the PDAs and to align to strategy and implementation actions, and really just to make sure that we're focusing on the right areas at the right time to drive collaboration, I guess, and action, noting that every community in the sub-region is important. This is really about visibility as a partnership. Next, Lyndall. So if we have a look, these are the current priority development areas that we have. We have 21. That's a lot of priority development areas to work on. So this exercise was really about simplifying and bringing that back in. And I think we've done quite a good job as a group based on the recommendations we've got today. Next. So what did we do? What we did was we developed a set of criteria which covers those elements there. We looked at the future-proof transformational moves, alignment to the implementation plan and the growth strategies of each of the councils, as well as future-proof. And other criteria like how many homes or jobs would this deliver? What's the scale? What investment is required? Does it have funding and financing challenges? Yes to all. Is there any innovation in terms of tools? And most critically, which areas require joint partnership, so joint future-proof partnership? Some of the areas the councils can just get on and do themselves, but really this was about looking at the areas that required this committee, this partnership to work together on. And then we categorised them into some areas, and I'm pleased to announce that we reduced, next Lyndall, we reduced the number of areas from 21 to 15. So that is some progress. And we did that through a mixture of agreeing the areas that would come off the list. We grouped some areas together, and yeah, we also split a couple of areas apart as well to give them the prominence that they needed given where we're at today. So this is what we recommended. The majority of the focus areas, and those are the ones that come to this committee and the trackers, they're actually the same, pretty much. We added a new one, North Waipa and Southwest Hamilton. So that's the Southern Links area and the airport area, combined those. And that's important because we know there's stuff happening in there now. And then you'll see Northwest Hamilton and Horotiu. That was expanded. So previously that was just Rotu Kauri. We joined in Horotiu from a boundaryless planning perspective because no one cares about boundaries. And we also added Te Rapa North into there as well. And then Ruakura, that one we joined the university into, because that makes sense in terms of proximity. So those were the areas that we've recommended will come to you and this committee on the trackers. And noting that this is quite a flexible process. So when things come in, we might need to adjust and we're just adaptable in that sense. So if we go to the next slide, Lyndall. This is very small on the screen for those in the room, but basically there's three areas, three groupings. So on the left-hand side are what we call other areas, which we'll monitor, but they won't come to you in the tracker regularly. And on the right-hand side of this table are enabled areas. So those are areas that are away that we're kind of interested in understanding. And you'll see there the grey areas. So those are the northern Waikato areas that we will be looking at how those are grouped. Can we simplify them? Can we adjust them as well? So next slide, Lyndall. So this is just an example of the tracker that we presented this tracker earlier in the year. It's a simplified version of our previous trackers. We found this quite useful. And now other urban partnerships across New Zealand are starting to use this as well. So once we've got confirmation from FPIC, we'll update the trackers to reflect the new areas. And next slide, Lyndall. And the other action that we'll take is updating the future-proof maps. So we're creating a good-looking set of maps that tell the story. That will help us all understand these areas a little bit better so we can collectively work on them. So that's all I've got in terms of presentations. This is the recommendation and I'll take some questions.
Okay, thanks, Karen. I'll open it up. Carolyn.
Thank you for the report. I would just note that maybe as a suggestion on the Rahuhu Pika map that we actually just put drop some pins of both anyway, or some of those other surrounds that we've got, like what we have the other maps, just to identify. Yeah. But my question in respect of the monitoring of the other areas, what does that look like? Monitoring of, and
it's a good question. So I think as a partnership, we'll keep an eye on those areas to say, is there actually some joint future-proof partnership action that is triggered that we need to then go, we need to work on this as a partnership. So it could happen, I'm trying to think of an example. So if a major fast track thing came through that needed this committee's attention, then perhaps we would consider putting that into a focus area. Alternatively, we can do something like an annual report where, like, here's the action that's happening. So it's not as regular as the others.
Yeah,
that makes sense. But
I'm just mindful that how we're keeping a lens over that, whether that would get to us is just obviously not diverting away from what our priority is, but somehow to actually just give consideration to what's coming down the line for better forward planning.
Yeah, so we can, when we come back with the more detailed quarterly reports, we can do what Karen said and just say, and this is what's new that's gone on in this area.
Yeah.
So you just get an update of what's happening, if anything, significant across the 15 with that key criteria that it requires partnership action. There's some reason that we need to do something collectively.
You're Adrian.
I was always quite fascinated how Morrinsville was number 21, and I thought, oh, I don't know what they've got planned for Morrinsville. It was just that I think we joined, so it was sort of like because of Morrinsville. So fully appreciate the mention of Morrinsville not being there, but obviously strategically, I think the thing is that I acknowledge from my district's perspective as our strategic connection to this group without having a nominated like that's what it was to me. It just looked like, oh, you'll just throw Morrinsville in as
Lockerbie.
the end.
I think it was
Yeah.
Lockerbie.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah.
And of course, that's all progressing. And I guess it's when we talk about public transport and stuff like that, that's when we come into the conversation or with, yeah, it's those strategic links that we link in with. So I can cope with that.
Yeah, nice.
Just thought I'd mention that Morrinsville now has a park run. This is an important development in the
Yes,
scene of
Heather,
sport
Heather.
in the Waikato.
Nanaya.
Yeah, kia ora, Karen. The information that we spoke about in terms of the PDAs, I met with Pierre for TGH, and he's got to send those maps that they consolidated in terms of the PDA. Once I get those, I'll send them on to you.
Oh, great. Kia ora, Nanaya.
Kia ora.
Yeah, Susan.
Yeah, look, always love a refresh and simplification of things. That's always really helpful. Otherwise, too much information and it cluttered. So, and obviously from a YPAR perspective, approach that the batting order sum and the importance of that area.
Nothing further. I just would like to note in terms of maps and the improvement when we started or the first approved future-proof strategy going back to 2009. I look at that now and I also look at the quality of the presentation of information changed significantly. So I just wanted to acknowledge those responsible for all of that and also acknowledge you, Karen, and the team in terms of the work specifically on the PDAs and picking up Susan's point in terms of that simplification and just keep that focus going because you might be able to tweak it even further over time. So, but I really wanted to acknowledge on behalf of the committee
Thank you.
the good work done in this space by you and the team.
Thank you.
Now move to the recommendations, which are on the screen. 7.4, to receive the report, endorse the refreshed set of priority development areas, notes the grouping in the Northern Waikato has been reviewed, and that the trackers will be reported on every 6 months with the next round in December 24. Thanks, Mayor Susan. I have a seconder for that. Chair Pamela. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we'll move to item 7.5, the adoption of the future-proof annual implementation plan. Welcome, Miffy. And as noted in the covering report, we had a discussion in this, I think, in the June meeting.
We did.
Over to you. Welcome.
Ahia Mārie, everyone. So we did the hard work. We got the strategy, our FDS across the line. It was endorsed by FPIC and has been adopted by all the partner councils. So now the focus really is into implementation of that strategy. So the key tool for that is obviously the implementation plan. So it is required by the MPS for urban development, but it is not a statutory document. So it's there to guide us how we are going to achieve the strategy. So a quick refresher, it has two key components. The first one is the identifying those key strategy enablers. So those things we really need to be able to deliver to get the strategy up and moving and achieve that settlement pattern that we have identified. The second part is looking at the key actions that we need that we have identified to move towards our achieve our transformational moves. So we have 7 of those within the strategy. So these are the things we're doing to try and make sure that we are making those moves. So based on the feedback that you gave us in June, we have made some changes. The key changes are to simplify the key actions. You may recall we had a lot of them against each of the transformational moves. We have simplified those right down to those really key ones, taking out anything that's a duplication or business as usual. We haven't forgotten those. We still have that list, but they're not in the plan. We have also revised the timing and the funding status of those key enablers based on the decisions that have been made in the long-term plans and enhanced annual plans. We've got greater recognition of affordable housing as a key issue for the region, and also the need to look more closely at industrial land supply and demand around Hamilton City. You may notice that that we have added in a current operating environment statement. So that is not part of the plan, but sits with the plan to identify what's going on in the political environment as we are moving towards implementation. As you will be aware, there's a number of announcements that have been made by government about changes that are coming that will have an impact on how we implement the strategy. So it's just noting those down, and that can be refreshed as needed in between the annual plan, the annual cycle of this implementation plan. So we are asking you to adopt it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Miffy. Mayor Adrian.
Oh, I'll turn.
Yeah, it was just a clarification just around Cambridge and being tier 3. Yeah, I thought we were the only ones tier 3, that Cambridge were tier.
So Cambridge, so Waipā is a tier 1 local authority, but Cambridge itself is tier 3 because
yeah.
it's based on an assessment of the urban environment of Hamilton City,
Yeah.
which is the tier 1 urban environment. So yeah, there's a bit of work that was done in the background to determine what tier each settlement was.
And just the other question I had was just around the, oh no, it's all right, it's trials anyway.
Apologies, Chair Pamela and Carolyn. I just saw movement out of my right side.
Hey, thank you so much for your report, Miffy. I think it's really fantastic that we have this implementation plan in place, and also just want to endorse the inclusion of that operating environment statement. I think that is so critical. That context is so critical for what we do. I would love to see, as I mentioned brief conversation before this meeting started, I would love to see the cost of reaction at local government level to an ever-changing, it seems, national direction. There are so many aspects that we are responding to that whenever there is a change in direction, that is further draw on our resources, further draw on our attention, and of course the ratepayer dollar. So really appreciate how we're providing that context. And I think that there's avenue for, when it changes, making commentary about the implications of those changes. But overall, really in support of the implementation plan as tabled. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Likewise, great report, and it looks absolutely fantastic. All I just will note, and I recognise not funded in certainly years 4 to 10 in terms of timing, but the rural access strategy, I just am mindful that we have Marae, absolutely, that, but we've also got a number of rural hamlets that actually aren't surrounded by Marae as well. So we just need to make sure that the right voices around the table when we have that discussion. So.
Kia ora.
No other questions or comments?
There's a
Ah,
hand up.
okay.
Yeah, I was trying to look for my hand and ended up clapping instead. Thank you. I was just had a question around the PT Pathways action. It's got years 4 to 10, but I mean, we're currently in the midst of doing that work. So I was wondering why that had that particular timing.
Bill, I might pass to you.
PT Pathways always had a 27 to 30 start date, and then the next 3 LTP cycles after that. We're doing work now for the 2027 LTP.
Right, okay. But some of what's already, like when you say PT pathways, I mean, isn't what we're doing right now already working on that? I'm a little bit confused about then what, yeah, by that 2027 start date, because there's already work going on identifying the routes and some investment that, well, depending on what councils decide to do around the subsidies, may start work on further, I guess, implementation of those routes.
Yes, my understanding is the regional council do have another project looking at the very short term with the PT pathways, trying to cover the longer term. Can't quite remember the name of that, but it's basically a review of current proposals and to optimise those.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right. All right, maybe I can go offline, ask that offline to properly understand that. The other one is in terms of supporting the delivery of some of those PDAs. It talks about continue to support delivery. I guess like a lot of stuff in here is still around, you know, it's all around planning and strategy, but just interested in what role, well, what it, in practice, what that might look like. For example, supporting the Central City or the Fairfield Enderley PDA.
Hi, Councillor Sarah. So I think
Hi,
that,
Karen.
hi. So that one is the work that we do through the PDAs in terms of identifying any barriers and then elevating those through this committee for action or through the CAG group. Yeah, it's a particularly important when we're working with other central government agencies. Sometimes there's conflicting priorities. So to iron those things out to make sure that we're getting the best delivery is really important.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Okay.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Sarah. No further questions. I'd just like to acknowledge the work that's gone into getting the implementation plan to where it is and ready for adoption. And just a reminder, it's non-statutory, it's not a tablet of stone and gets reviewed annually. And no doubt, Miffy, if there was some major matter, that would come back to the committee and there can be tweaks to it on the way through. Okay. If I can have a mover and seconder to receive the report and to adopt that annual implementation plan. Thanks, Carolyn. Seconded by Mayor Adrian. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So item 7.6, LTP funding alignment, page 106 in your agenda. Robert.
Look, this is just the ongoing refreshing of our monitoring of what is in the partner LTPs in terms of water, and there's an appended paper about transport, linking back to the future development strategy and the identified critical infrastructure to deliver on our settlement pattern. So I don't think there's anything hugely new in it. We still have a bunch of unfundeds, which are a consequence of the combination of the difficulties we're under with our LTP cycle, and that two of the partners didn't do a full LTP, so they haven't thought about how they're going to fund their long-term programs in a published way. It's really here for discussion from you and something we will continue reporting on because it's kind of critical to the implementation of the strategy, and it's our key role in terms of the strategy now is monitoring that we are implementing both the water and transport stuff. The reason for the two separate papers is that we're reporting the same material separately to the transport subcommittee, so I didn't combine the two into separate reports. I just get them as, into a single report. I get them as separate reports around. Nothing else from me. It's over for discussion.
Okay. Any questions or comments? What I might do, given we have one recommendation to cover the two reports, if we can turn to then page 118, which was the report to the Future-Proof PT subcommittee. Yep. And if Bill or anyone wanted to comment on that, Leah. Yep, no, you can do that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thought I'd just note in terms of the LTPs, as you note, from Waipara undertaking these, Hamilton is also going to be undertaking an LTP amendment, primarily to address decisions around waters, which will include considering our capital program for water in light of the water regulator requirements, so that may necessitate additional capital for water. So Robert, Bill just really foreshadowing that in the case of Hamilton, the picture is evolving, and this is also linked to the increased debt profile available to CCO entities such as proposing. So certainly for a Hamilton case, it's an evolving picture. Case for Waikato.
Thanks, Blair. Phil, do you have anything in terms of the report on transport funding? Okay. Any questions or comments on that? Paula, you.
Just to let you know, I had a joined up conversation with the Waikato Times over the effect of the NLTP this morning. Just pointing out not really giving them a clip around the ear, but more to alert them to the pressures of high growth and the implications of pulling back on the spend in our patch, and what that will do to our ability to roll out the required transportation for growth, but also how to respond to safety and maintenance and repairs. All of those three things become a little bit, well, quite a bit more difficult actually now. So yeah, just to let you know that happened. It was a joint mayoral message, so it was good. And sorry we didn't quite catch up with Adrian to get her in the loop, but your experience is exactly the same. So you know, and just making the point that that was a very good, the media were very interested in having a coalition in the room to tackle an issue, and I think we need to consider how we best use that going forward for common messaging. There you go,
and yeah, I'll just add on to that, I guess, is around the whole public transport and the risk to our public transport, those on trials, because the government funding is at risk. And that's the whole challenge around, getting people on PT. So welcome to our world, eh? Who pays?
And sorry if I may,
That's right.
Mr. Chair, just following on from that, I think, and what you're mentioning, Mayor Paula, in terms of a coordinated conversation with the media, because what I find is the majority of our ratepayers don't understand how public transport is funded, full stop. They don't understand the role of regional council versus their local council versus central government. And so what they'll see with these trials is just that the trial goes. And they'll be looking for somebody to point to and say, it's your responsibility. And I think there's some messaging around where the majority of the funding needs to come from for these public transport routes to progress in accordance with the growth that we are collectively being asked to deliver on behalf of our communities.
Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say firstly, thanks to Chair Pamela and Mayors for talking to the media on this, because I think it is important that we are able to kind of translate all of these decisions in the NLTP for the community and for them to understand the role that government funding has in transport. And I do, I guess, hope that we can still, though, make some progress with some local share and take a joint up approach to working out the best way to do that and to prioritise. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Well, just to explain, there was a bit of confusion on my part as chair because I picked up the agenda and went through that of our original meeting. And I didn't reprint the updated agenda, hence the confusion around transport funding, which you all have electronically on your system. So hence that's why I was trying to deal with them, and I was thinking about different reports. Notwithstanding that, we've got the long-term plan funding alignment. If I can have a mover and seconder for that recommendation. Bruce, seconded by Chair Pamela. There's nothing further on that. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And then now we'll move to the NLTP funding for the future-proof sub-region. We've had some discussion on that. Is there anything further in terms of questions or comments?
I noted I was going to do a verbal briefing if I had an update, so maybe I haven't got much of an update, but I can give a bit more what we've heard so far, kind of thing. So and I see Cole O'Keefe is on the phone, I think, or on the line in place of David and Jess. So Cole, you can correct me if I get anything wrong. We're working through the program with NZTA. They are very clearly focused on Cambridge to Pierere and getting that underway, and working out how, as they set up that project team, they can keep us informed as future-proof of progress on Cambridge to Pierere, and they're really happy to do that. We've also had a conversation about Southern Links. They have not yet set up their Southern Links internal project team, so they're still organising themselves in that regard. But again, the same conversation is going on with them at the moment. In terms of some of the possible funded projects, including that West Hamilton network study, which was really about the block of land between where Southern Links hits the city and Greenwood Street and Dinsdale Road, that kind of area. We're still trying to clarify with NZTA whether that's possible funding because it's actually already included in the project funding for Southern Links, because we don't understand how you could plan Southern Links without understanding the network consequences of a whole lot of cars feeding into the bottom end of Greenwood Street at 110 kph with no infrastructure to accommodate them. So we're having a fairly tough conversation with NZTA, trying to get them to clarify scope of those projects and what is fundable or not fundable. In the NLTP, we're hoping for some flex, but the indications are at the moment that if it's identified as possible, the only way it will get funded is if something that was probable falls over or comes in under budget. So possible projects are pretty unlikely, at least in the next 12 months, to get underway. And I think, as I point out in my memo, the one thing we haven't as a team had a chance to get our head around, because we haven't seen the detail of it yet, is how this GPS and NLTP aligns with the Going for Housing Growth policy announcements, which encourage us to provide density along our defined BRT corridors. And yet we've got no money to do that in terms of service provision. So some tough conversations as a partnership to have with our Waka Kotahi colleagues over time.
Thanks for that update, Robert. Any other questions or comments? There are not before you recommendation to receive the NLTP funding report. I'm happy to move that. A seconder for that, please. Mayor Paula. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. That brings us to the completion of the business on the agenda. Couple of things I just wanted to highlight. Linda was very busy prior to the meeting. She was worried about whether we would have a quorum or not. So she did a whole lot of work, and some people got phone calls, etc., and rearranged their diaries. So I'd just like to acknowledge and thank people for doing that, to make sure we had the required numbers. And then finally, and I know David is an apology today, given his resignation from NZTA and moving to become Chief Executive of Karakia District Council. So I did acknowledge David at the last Chief Executives meeting, but I wanted to do it formally and in public today, just to thank him for the last 3.5 to 4 years in his regional director role. Superb performance in that role, quite insightful, very considered, at the same time, very pragmatic in terms of the approach. And certainly, and this came through very clearly when we held hearings and questions, a disciple of that boundaryless approach in terms of planning and implementation. And also having that view that what's good for future-proof is good for the region, and what's good for the region is good for future-proof. So I just wanted to acknowledge his contribution, and he really has, both in the formal sense around this table, but also throughout was involved in 2 hearings processes as part of the hearings panel, and also that ability to approach him and discuss things informally. So on behalf of the Future Proof Partnership, thank him and wish him well in his new Chief Executive role, and hopefully we will see and engage with him from time to time once he gets his feet under the table at Karakia District Council. On that note, that completes the meeting. Lyndall, would you like to close in Karakia, please?
Unuhia mai te irutapu nui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te hinenaro, I te ara takatū, koia rā e rongo, e whakairea aki ki runga, kia tina, tina. Haumie, huie, taiki.
Taiki.
Meeting closed. Thank you, everyone.